Right then, folks, welcome to the People Prescription, your weekly dose of people ops wisdom. Today, we're going to be talking about the hidden dangers behind the wheel and why driver safety is not only the job of the people driving for you, but also your job as a business leader as well to be mindful of. We've got a fantastic guest with us today, Adrian Hide from Adrian Hide Drivers Risk Assessment. He's going to be guiding us through step by step, really, context around when organisations need to consider workplace road safety, also understanding a bit more about the legal reality of engaging people who are essentially working and driving at the same time, and perhaps even looking at common business blind spots that affect most organisations across the UK. So welcome, Adrian.
Thank you very much, Richard. Great to be with you.
Yeah, great to have you here. Really looking forward to our conversation today. And yeah, so essentially, Adrian and I know each other through networking circles, through supporting local businesses across Staffordshire, but also nationally as well, in terms of their not only HR support, but also their driver support as well. And today, really, we're going to be guiding you through some areas, some talking points. It's very conversational in terms of the Health and Safety at Work Act. Any sort of questions that you have on the back of today, we're going to put a link below where you can access our support services. And we're also going to talk a little bit more about a health assessment, almost like a health and safety check for your organisation. It also weaves in some HR support too. That'll literally take less than 60 seconds to complete, but it's a great way for you to test the temperature of your existing format and what you're currently doing within your organisation to make sure that you're on the right track. And if you do need any support from either Adrian or I on the back of today, then you can schedule a call with us directly. So yeah, Adrian, great to have you with us today. In terms of today's support then, just a bit of a welcome and context setting. We're really going to be talking about something that actually doesn't get talked about very often, which is workplace road safety. And it'd be great to get a bit of an idea initially, perhaps even a real story or a headline around what organisations can do when they're facing perhaps a challenge on the back of ignoring some of their responsibilities towards drivers, and maybe even bust some myths along the way around one thing that you and I say constantly to people who need our support is that you don't know what you don't know. And in this case, especially with workplace safety and road safety in particular, ignorance it's something that could potentially cost not only the reputation of the business that's employing people, but also there's a huge health and safety duty of care there too. Would you say that's fair to say?
Absolutely, Richard. Yeah. And yes, my favourite saying is you don't know what you don't know. We're probably also familiar with that good old fashioned saying, what you can't close the gate once the horse has bolted.
Absolutely.
And very often a business will be potentially unaware of the legal duty of care they have towards people who drive for work. And the first time they find out about this is once the horse has bolted. In other words, once you've had that first major incident that brings you to the attention of the investigating authorities. And that's the point that they start to ask all these challenging questions. Have you got? Can I see? Show me how you do. And that's the point at which the business looks and goes, oh dear, I didn't know we're supposed to have all that in place. And driver safety is one of those things that fits within the Health and Safety at Work Act. Essentially, none of us should come to work and be harmed. Any of the people come into your premises or you and your staff have contact with, whether that be on a site, in a motor vehicle, they shouldn't come to harm as a result of your activities. And health and safety law exists to ensure that there are processes in place to meet those obligations. And driving is one of those, probably one of the most dangerous things any of us do on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Statistically, there are far more people killed being at work in a motor vehicle than there are any other of the high risk work activities. So like working on a construction site is a good example. I mean, you try and get on a construction site without the proper PPE and accreditation, you just can't get past the barrier. And there's an interesting sign that is very often on the front of these sort of construction sites that says, health and safety starts here. I don't think it does. I think it starts when that tradesperson got in his or her van and drove to the construction site. That's when health and safety starts.
one thing I'm always mindful of when I'm speaking to organizations, and we support organizations from perhaps having 10 employees plus up to 100 employees, but specifically for health and safety at work, there is a trigger point around where people engage a certain amount of staff or a certain amount of people
Yeah.
within their organization. So what does that look like?
Yeah, the trigger really is 5 or more employees. So as a business grows from a sole trader and you take on your first and your second and your third employee, the landscape changes markedly for a lot of things. HR is one of them, isn't it?
Yeah.
But when you hit 5 or more employees, there is a legal responsibility placed on the business that says you must have documented health and safety arrangements in place. Okay. Prior to that, they can be up in the head. Okay, not a great thing to have to do when you're up against the investigators to try and think off the top of your head what's in place. Much better when you can refer to computer systems and paper trails, etc. But 5 or more employees, you must have a health and safety arrangement in place, must be documented, and driving must be part of those arrangements. It's a work activity. A motor vehicle, when used for work purposes, is a piece of work equipment. And as well as the Health and Safety at Work Act, it comes under another piece of regulation that is called the Operation, as well as health and safety legislation saying that you should manage driver safety. There is a regulation called PUWER, PUWER, and that stands for the Provision and Use of Work Equipment Regulations. And the health and safety executives say a motor vehicle, when used for work purposes, is a piece of work equipment. And therefore, Mr. Employer, you have a legal duty of care to ensure that equipment is safe, it's appropriate, it's being checked on a regular basis. And here's the thing, the person operating it, the driver, is safe and competent to use that equipment. Now, that kind of poses an interesting question, doesn't it? Because you'll say, got a driving license. That's their license to use that equipment. I think we'll all agree that we see all sorts of different styles of driving out on the road network, don't we?
Yes,
Some
yeah,
good,
exactly.
some not so good. So really an employer should be able to demonstrate that they have taken responsibility for making sure that person is competent. And this is where training comes in, driver training comes in. It's also where the organization's driver safety policy kicks in. It's an articulation of their expected standards, the do's, the don'ts, etc.
Understood. I mean, certainly from a people ops perspective, I think one of the things I find a lot initially when we first do some discovery discussions with new clients, especially, is that there is a barrier around understanding in terms of, okay, well, what are grey fleet workers? And typically, the way we frame that at OES HR and through the HR Doctor, which is our flagship product, is it's really about employee owned cars that are used for work. And a lot of the time, the discussion tends to be around making sure that we're doing the right documentation checks, making sure that employers are checking drivers' licenses, making sure that they've got the correct provision in their employee insurance, their own insurance policies that driving for work is part of that. So we're asking for them to provide that information to us initially as part of perhaps the onboarding process, but there's an element of due diligence there going on where we're constantly keeping in touch throughout the year, because ultimately there might have been a speeding fine, there might have been something. Essentially, we've got to communicate that to the employee to say, look, if something like this was to pop up, if you had a speeding fine or something occurred, let us know about it so we can then update our records. And I think one of the biggest challenges I find with the rules around employing people and driving for work is that a lot of it, with anything legal, it's not what you and I know, it's what we can prove. So one of the biggest challenges is how do we build that narrative of proof? And ultimately, it's about paperwork. It's about making sure you've got notes around certain aspects. And we can support with that in terms of building healthy habits of note taking and making sure that the paper trail's there. Because if it's not there, then we can't really prove either way as to whether or not an employee has met that duty of care to begin with. So that tends to be quite a big challenge to overcome, especially for more modest sized businesses, because ultimately they're focused massively on growing their organization. These areas tend to be areas perhaps that can slip through the cracks. And, we're there to ultimately keep the client accountable for the work that they're doing, but we're also there to relieve them of some of these aspects so we can actually build a paper trail up for them too. And we do that through the employee handbooks, through policy process, through building the right systems in place so you're capturing that data early on. So that tends to be one of the crossovers really in terms of where workplace road safety and HR meet. Also, things like what happens in the event of if somebody was to damage a vehicle that belonged to the business. So we're talking perhaps a pool vehicle or a company car. A lot of employees want to be able to protect their assets. Now, as you know, at the HR Doctor, we're very much about your people are your greatest asset. But that being said, also, items of equipment that they're using will have huge value assigned to them, like company cars and pool vehicles. So a lot of employers want to protect that if an employee is perhaps negligent in how they're driving that vehicle. I've had situations over the years where somebody's gone into the back of a lamppost on more than one occasion, and employers quite rightly want to address that matter as a behavior issue. Are they driving in a way that is safe to begin with? But also they want some kind of financial option to say, well, we can claw monies back from their wage or through the employee directly to cover things like insurance excesses. And we can do that. We can weave that into some of the legal paperwork that's prepared for an employee. But I'm sure on the back of what you've shared there, clearly there's some real headlines around what the challenges are, what the financial implications are as well. But what would you say are what's the sort of reality, shall we say, from the perspective of the blind spots that you see regularly? And have you noticed any sort of common themes and trends around, okay, well, whose responsibility is it? If it's their own car, is it the company's responsibility? Would a company need to do anything if an employee's driving their own vehicle?
Yeah, you've touched on a lot of things there, Richard, all very valid. I think what I'd like to do first and foremost is just set a foundation by just winding the clocks back a little bit and saying, what is a work-related journey? That's the key thing, because a person's commute to and from their normal place of work, and that normal place of work could potentially be 2 or 3 places, okay? But that's all they ever do, from home to that place of work and back again. That's not an employer's responsibility. It's called the commute. Everything else somebody does on behalf of the business is the employer's responsibility. So we've got people who really go out and visit customers. And we might have a tradesperson in a van that goes from job to job. We might have somebody who's delivering something in a small van. We could have a sales force that are going out visiting clients. They're the easy ones to identify. But what about the occasional driver? You use the term grey fleet. And that's a term that grey is always an area of mystique, isn't it? When we say, oh, it's a bit of a grey area, that.
Yes, yeah.
And that's why we call it a grey fleet, because we have it, but we don't. Are we responsible for it? Yes, we are. Who are they? I don't really know. You're going to have people that, for example, you might send to a networking event to represent the business. They might go to a conference or an expo. You might put them on a training event, or you might simply say, on your way home, I don't suppose you could pop in and drop this off. So it's on your way, isn't it? That is a work-related journey. That means the journey and the vehicle that they are using falls under the responsibility of the company, which means we have to make sure the vehicle is suitable, that it's taxed, that it's MOT'd, that the driver has business class insurance on their policy, and that the vehicle is checked on a regular basis to make sure it's safe in exactly the same way as all of our company car drivers do. So a business has a legal duty to manage the grey fleet for those things I've just described. So one of the blind spot is going to be, oh, we don't have any company cars. We have people who drive their own vehicles. So it's not my responsibility. Big mistake. It is absolutely, definitely your responsibility.
Right.
And you've probably got a little bit more of a headache because you have control over what vehicle you buy as a company vehicle, who services it, when it gets serviced, what repairs are done, who can drive it. You'll know it's insured. You'll know it's taxed. You'll know it's going to go for its MOT. It's in your control. When you have a grey fleet, that control shifts to the owner of that vehicle, the driver, the employee. But nonetheless, you have a legal duty of care to make sure that all that stuff is in place. And you talked about pieces of paper and paper trails. Absolutely right. We can introduce technology into the business that can take away all the pain of managing people and vehicles and drivers. So that's one of the blind spots. I suppose the other one is, it's not my job to manage driver safety. So I want you to imagine this. We've got a CEO of a successful business. They employ 40 people. They're on the up. The CEO's having a game of golf with a friend. And this guy says, "Oh, have you heard about so-and-so?" "No, why? What's up?" "He's in court next week." "Why? What's up?" "He had a very serious road traffic incident and it's looking as if he hasn't got everything in place to manage driver safety. And I think he's going to be charged for failing in his duty of care under the Health and Safety at Work Act." Oh, flip. So Monday morning comes, the CEO goes to his business and he heads straight over to his health and safety manager and says, "What have we got in place for driver safety?" "Don't really know, boss, but it's not really my job because I'm about health and safety, the building, the site, trips and falls, fire evacuation, you name it. Don't give me people and drivers. Surely that's the fleet manager." So then they go and speak to the person in the business who tends to look after the company vehicle fleet. Might not be their full-time job, might be. He or she will say, "Hang on a minute, boss. Don't give me people. I'm about the acquisition, maintenance, and the disposal of the vehicle fleet, not the people that drive them." Aha, HR, Richard, you. And your colleague's going to say, "Hang on a minute, boss. We're about onboarding, disciplinary, contracts of employment, organising training, not managing people." Big crack opens up and all of the driver safety responsibilities fall down the crack. So that's another blind spot. It's not my job. It is the job of the controlling mind of the business to make sure it's done. By whom, it doesn't matter, so long as that person can delegate responsibility to a competent person who, if they were working with me, I would be their single point of contact. And then together we would make sure that business is compliant with health and safety and it's doing the right thing as a responsible employer. So not my job, big cracks opening up and all of the safety stuff falling down the hole. Those are the two key blind spots. And then probably, and I don't mean this as a criticism, but the ignorance that is around, I didn't realize I was supposed to manage driver safety as a separate thing. Okay. Yeah. And I very often will see people say things like, "Oh yeah, we cover driver safety in the handbook." And then they show me a copy of the handbook. And then on page 96, there's one paragraph that is very loose. Now, driving is probably one of the most dangerous things we all do on a daily basis. And therefore it warrants having its own attention in the form of a risk assessment, a driver safety policy, and then the ongoing governance around driver safety. And it's that you'll be challenged with potentially in court if something goes wrong. Exactly. So reverting back to your handbook with that single paragraph, you are standing on the thinnest of ice with a great big crack and a boiling hot of water underneath to melt that ice. Okay. Yeah. With a robust program in place, you will be able to demonstrate you've got everything in place to manage driver safety.
As you're sharing that there, Adrian, there's so many common threads, I'd say, around how people approach from a business leader's perspective, people ops, and also health and safety and workplace driving in particular, which is your area of expertise. Yeah, I was listening intently to what you were saying there, and the big word for me that's coming through, it's around accountability. Who's actually accountable for that aspect within the business? And what I find a lot of the time, certainly from a people ops perspective, is that as organizations are growing, particularly fast growing organizations, there's always a question mark around, okay, well, who's actually accountable for what within the organization? And where there is that clear accountability, you do tend to find that as organizations have that, they're also a lot more profitable, they're a lot more systems orientated as well, so people understand exactly what their role is and what their responsibility is. And again, from what you were sharing there, one thing I find particularly interesting is that a lot of what we do in people ops, similar to as you were sharing it there with drivers' workplace safety, is it's 90% prevention and 10% execution. So a lot of the work that we do is there to avoid problems popping up rather than reactively dealing with challenges when they occur. And one thing I find is that where there is that perhaps grey area of accountability, who's actually accountable for what, those areas can get neglected quite quickly because the view is from a business leader's perspective, well, nothing bad's happened so far. And for that reason, it doesn't get as much focus because they tend to be quite reactive, for some business leaders, they'll only jump on it when it becomes a problem. And actually, my narrative really is that from a people ops perspective and also from a workplace safety perspective, we need to be getting ahead of the curve really and making sure that we're putting the right systems in place to begin with to avoid these problems occurring rather than reactively dealing with them. So, that's a key thing I find where there is a correlation between what you and I do. And complacency isn't compliance. Really looking at that one crash in your instance or one incident from a people ops perspective, such as a legal battle, that can have a huge impact on a company's reputation. And that word you referred to there, refer to it in the staff handbook. One thing we constantly say to our clients at OES HR, and again through the flagship product, the HR Doctor, is that we've got to practice what we preach. So it's all well and good having something in an employee handbook outlining what the process is, but then the only way we actually embed that within the culture of an organization is through behavior, through action, through making sure that we're actually showing up in a way that's detailed in the employee handbook. So practicing what you preach has a lot to do with that. And the only way we can do that really is by keeping it top of mind for those that are accountable, not only for their own safety, but for that of their colleagues and the wider company as well. So from a governance perspective, you've touched on there some of the blind spots that a lot of companies tend to have initially around this area. What would good governance look like? So if you wouldn't mind just sharing a few stories perhaps or insights around how we can break that down into clear elements for our audience.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, I very often will say to a client or a prospective client, if I was to stop any of your members of staff in the corridor and say to that member of staff, what does this business have in place to manage driver safety? What I don't want them to do is go, and have to think about it. That means it's either not in place, or if it's in place, it hasn't been well communicated. It's not a living, breathing part of the business's health and safety arrangements. What I'm hoping that person can say, oh yeah, when I first started, during my induction, I had to sign up to the safe driving program. I was assigned an induction course. I had to read a driver safety policy. They showed me the risk assessment. They put me on some training. I've been given this app. I've got to check my vehicle on a regular basis. If they reel all that off, I'm thinking, yeah, this business knows what they're doing. So what good looks like is, let me describe building a house. Okay, let's just move away from this world of driver safety and let's go to bricks and mortar and build a building. So we've got our lovely piece of land, nice virgin soil sat there. All my materials have been delivered, bricks, blocks, windows, floorboards, tiles, you name it, it's there. So in my naivety, I get me cement mixer out, I mix up the mortar and I start laying bricks directly onto the turf. And I build it up and I put a roof on it and I put floors in it and I'm dead proud. And all of a sudden, a year later, it's leaning to one side. And I'm thinking, what's gone wrong there? Now I bring a professional in, they say, did you have a foundation? What's one of those? It's a big hole with concrete in it and it supports your building. Ah, okay, never thought about that. So in driver safety, your foundation that supports everything that you do, the culture, the accountability, is all about the foundation you have in place. And the foundation is, have we first and foremost as a business said, we care about our people. We accept driving is a high risk activity. Regardless of what the law says, we want to do everything possible to keep them safe. It just so happens to be a legal responsibility anyway. There's stuff I think we need to do. Not quite sure what that stuff is. I think I'll bring some help in. And that help comes in the form of saying, okay, the first thing we need to do, I understand you've got the right culture. You've got the desire to put some change in place that will mean that we are doing the right thing as a responsible employer and we're managing driver safety well. Let's start with the risk assessment. Let's have a little think about all of the things that could possibly go wrong. Okay. And let's create this list. What could go wrong? Who could be harmed? What do we currently do to mitigate that risk? And what could we do more of or better? Who's going to do it and when we're going to do it? Okay, so that gives us a big long list. Once we've got that list, we can say, okay, I think I need to set a little bit of a framework around expected standards, but it's a two-way thing. Health and safety is a two-way thing. The employee is equally responsible for their own health and safety and the health and safety of others, as is the employer. So the driver safety policy is created. It's quite a comprehensive document, and it articulates the expected standards, the rules, the do's, the don'ts, the what ifs. And you touched on something, Richard. The company reserved the right to reclaim from the employee any excessive damage to a company vehicle, as an example. Okay. If it's not in the driver safety policy and there isn't something within the contract of employment that says, as a business, we have a safe driving program in place that forms part of your contractual responsibility, that employee will turn around and say, I didn't know I was going to have to pay.
Exactly.
And the chances are they'll probably get away with it. Worst case scenario is that you have had a driver, an employee, who's written off umpteen vehicles, umpteen complaints are coming into the business. You're absolutely at your wit's end with that person. And they come along to HR and say, we've got to exit this person from the business. Why? Because what's the backstory? What do you mean? Hey, there is no backstory, but this has been going on for 2 years. There's nothing documented. There's no processes in place. There's no expected standards. That makes the exit of that employee very difficult. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think any situation where there's a complete lack of paper trail and evidence to support the reasons why somebody's leaving a business, then it proves incredibly difficult to then follow a process, because ultimately the process is based on what you can prove. I think one thing to touch on as well, just to make it super clear, that when it comes to damaging vehicles, we're not talking about genuine incidents of accidents.
No.
You know, people sometimes, we're humans at the end of the day, mistakes are made, and especially it might not necessarily be the responsibility of the employee. It could have been a third party's responsibility in those situations. We're not talking about action against employees for what would be a third party's incident and it was their fault. But what we're talking about is at fault accidents or at fault damage to a company vehicle or a pool vehicle. And that's where companies, a lot of the time, when I'm speaking to business leaders, they're saying we need something in place to address that situation. But coming back to your initial point, 100%, we need evidence, we need something, we need a paper trail to indicate what went wrong. That then gives you the opportunity to address the issue, make sure that we've got a clear causation link as well between that person and the incident too. Because without that causation link, it's really difficult to address. So we always encourage business leaders or the people that they essentially assign that responsibility to and the accountability within the business to build that paper trail up robustly and break it down into clear elements. As you've shared there, you know, the risk assessment's important, the policy is important, but then also, okay, what are the procedures around that? So what would the procedures look like? Are we talking vehicle checks or incident reporting, fatigue management?
So just to rewind, we've built our foundation now. That foundation is, we've got the right culture, we've got the risk assessment in place, we've got the driver safety policy in place. Okay, we need to make sure we communicate that to our staff effectively. So when I'm working with a client, I'll say the worst thing we can do is parachute change in suddenly. Okay, people go, whoa, what's this about? Why are we suddenly doing this? So I have what I call a 3-stage program implementation process. Stage 1, simple email goes out to the staff, says, boys and girls, driving is a high risk activity. It's something we all engage in. We are a responsible employer. We'll do everything possible to keep you safe whilst on the road. So we are reviewing our current arrangements for driver safety in the workplace. More information to follow. So people go, okay, they're working on it. Okay. In the background, we've now crafted the risk assessment and the driver safety policy, and we're ready to share that and get sign up from the employees. So the communication too is to send out a slightly more structured communication that says, right, here is our driver safety policy. I need you to read it. You are then going to be asked to complete an application to become an authorised driver. Remember earlier on, I said a lot of businesses, I'm not really sure who drives for my business. This is the point at which you will know each and every single person in your business who drives, because you've given them a form. Fill it in. And there's a crucial part of that form that we need. And that is the declaration from the employee that I have sight of, I have read, I understand, and I will adhere to the driver safety policy. I further declare that, and then there's a few other bits and pieces we put on there.
What would happen, Adrian, if an employee was to not sign that? Have you ever come across a situation like that where somebody's refused to sign, or are most people quite open to signing,
Yeah.
authorizing that kind of agreement?
I haven't, in the 7 years that I've been doing this business and the
Mm.
umpteen years that I've been doing in the business elsewhere, we've never had any kickback from an employee because this is being put in place because we care about you. It's the messaging that goes out first. And when that person reads the policy, they'll realize it's not all about we're going to come at you with a great big stick every time something goes wrong. It's not about that. So you talked about recharge of vehicle damage. We're really talking about the person that's given a company car that just doesn't care, doesn't
Yeah.
clean it. It's got scratched and damaged. The dogs have been all over the place in the back and it goes back a mess. And the lease company are now going to charge that business for the sort of loss of value of that vehicle. And that's because of the neglect of the driver. Those are the sort of scenarios we're looking to recharge back. But most of the content of the policy is about protecting you and looking at your safety and foremost. So I've never had anybody that says, I'm not signing that. Okay.
Excellent.
Once we've got that declaration back, we've got a paper trail. So
Hmm.
when you go to that in person and say, we've just had notification that you have been speeding. It is your responsibility to pick up those points and the fine. They can't turn around and say, I didn't know that because it's in the policy that they've signed. So if they fail to pay a toll, going, let's say, through the M6 toll, and they get caught out with a fine, the company can recharge them because in the policy it says failure to pay any tolls, parking charges, etc., is the responsibility of the employee. They can't turn around and say, I didn't know that.
So with that then, Adrian, what would a good follow-up look like? Are we talking about how people review those kind of incidents as
Yeah,
business leaders, or how they
yeah,
act on near misses?
yeah. I'd just like to finish the governance side. So the
Sure.
governance side really is the final part of that is that third communication that goes out that says, boys and girls, thank you very much for your support over the last couple of 3 weeks or so. Our
Mhm.
driver risk management program has now been reviewed. It's live and kicking. It is our expected standards from this point forward. Could I please remind you of the declaration that you signed as part of this process? And we do that as a reminder. So we've built the foundations, we've built the house, we've got the roof on. We just need to look after it now. Okay,
Right.
the routine maintenance. So the routine maintenance is making sure we license check people on a regular basis, and a regular
Mhm.
basis will be dependent upon the amount of driving they do. Give you an example. Best practice says for anybody with up to 3 points, annual check. Anybody with up to 6 points, 6 monthly. Anybody with 9 points, monthly until three
Right.
points falls off. We need to make sure that any assigned training to them is done. And then the key thing about the maintenance is we will establish the frequency of the vehicle safety checks.
So how do you enhance the picture then for business leaders? So I know I understand you do offer some kind of training. Is that like a refresher? How do you
Yeah.
tend to deliver that?
Okay. So where I have helped the business to implement a driver risk management program, the key thing for me is everybody in the business at that point knows exactly what's in place. The
Right.
moment a new employee comes in, they're none the wiser. So we need to make sure that person is briefed appropriately as part of their induction, what's in place for driver safety in the workplace and what process they would be expected to follow. Now, I can help my clients with that because I've created a very straightforward 15-minute online induction course for those new starters. It takes the pain away of having to remember what to tell them, what they've got to do, how they got to do it, why they've got to do it. That's the first thing. Okay.
Absolutely.
Then the next thing is if the business have an appetite to invest in training, and trained drivers are going to be more fuel efficient, they'll have less incidents, you'll have less complaints from them, you will see a reduction in your running costs for your fleet. I've got 3 online driver training courses, one for car drivers, one for van drivers, and one for those people who are driving electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are completely different bits of technology. You can drive a van on a car license. If you're going from a car to a van with no training, you probably wouldn't know that you've got different speed limits on certain roads. You
Right.
probably wouldn't know about the weight restrictions of a van and how you work it out, and how I could go down to a builder's merchant and get 36 bricks, put them in the back of the van. I could get another 100 in there, but I've only got 36. But all of a sudden, my axle's overloaded and I'm committing an offence. You wouldn't know that. So this is where training comes in. It makes sure that those people are appropriately briefed on how to use that equipment safely, but also to make sure they're safe and fuel efficient.
Absolutely. And one thing I'm picking up on there, Adrian, as well as you sharing that, is that there's so much correlation between when we're speaking and supporting with people ops for business leaders, that there's an aspect initially of when we first speak to them, there's perhaps some assumptions around, similar to what you were saying there about you don't assume that having a valid license is
Mm.
meaning that they're a safe driver. But
Yeah,
also understanding, I'd have no clue about how the impact of the weightage of what would be a journey for a domestic vehicle could then create challenges from a compliance perspective and the checks needed. And assumptions are incredibly dangerous. And the
yeah,
way I tend to explain our services at OES HR and through the HR doctor is that what makes us different is that we don't assume anything. We try to get to know our clients. So we understand the people that are working there. We know the names.
yeah.
We know what's working, what isn't working within the business, how we can support them. And everything you're sharing there is very aligned to the way that we work at OES HR around. We do ask lots of questions early on and we do make sure that we understand the business because once we've got that understanding, we're not necessarily making any assumptions either because we know very closely what's driving that business and what makes that business tick, really. One thing I would encourage listeners to do is to review their existing driver safety policy. Adrian can support with this too. But there are some practical steps that Adrian and I have been working on in the background to really help business leaders with this. And it'd be a great opportunity, I think, to introduce the business health check, which
Mm.
would be a fantastic way, really, just to understand, okay, is anything of what we've spoken about today that Adrian and I have been discussing relevant for your business? And the business health check is a really quick 60 seconds it takes to fill it in. Really great way for you to establish, and more importantly, for us not to assume that you actually need support with this. And similarly, once we understand your business, we can then offer a much more specific and guided way in which to help your organization. So with that in mind, if I share with you on screen, what that looks like, and it's a great way for you to perhaps just introduce some of the questions as well, Adrian. So the business health check that we've prepared here, folks, is a really useful way for you to take the temperature of your team in terms of where you currently sit around everything from health and safety, workplace safety for drivers, and also from your people ops perspective as well. Super quick to do, literally take the health check here, add your details in, and once you started, it'll take you through to a very quick assessment. As I say, it takes less than 60 seconds to complete, and it's a great way for you to establish areas that perhaps are risky at the moment that Adrian and I can support you with. Also, any policies that you might require. But more importantly, it's about protecting your team, which, as you know, at OES HR, we believe your team are your greatest asset. It always surprises me when we speak to business leaders. I was speaking to a leader the other week. They had a huge turnover, way over £1 million per year, and half of that went towards their wage bill. So in terms of expenses, what they were paying as wages was half of their turnover. That usually suggests to me that particular asset, which in this case is your people, takes a lot of resources and it's incredibly valuable to your organization as well. So why not take a look after that valuable asset as well? And one way you can do that is through this health check. And as you can see, you get a personalized score. And on the back of it, Adrian and I can reach out and connect with you to see if there's anything else that we can support you with too. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Adrian, before we switch back over to the normal format?
No, I think that's really helpful, Richard. And obviously, when you introduced that, I did that myself. It's very intuitive. As you say, it only takes a few seconds. And I think it helps to uncover the blind spots. And it turns the what you don't know to now I know. And you've got options then, haven't you?
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And you make a much more informed decision about how you can
Yeah.
address those blind spots as well. Brilliant. So the key message I'm hearing from you overall, Adrian, is that we can't wait as business leaders for a crash to act upon something. We have to review things like our drivers' safety policies, make sure we've got our people operations structures and systems in place, not just in the next quarter or the next year, now in the present moment. I'd invite all our listeners to download the Business Safe Health Check for them to review through it and really just make sure that they're getting some good advice. But from a driver safety perspective, it's not only a legal duty, is it, Adrian? You've got a moral duty as well. People's lives depend on the business having certain systems and processes in place.
Yeah.
What's the actual impact of that? What's the worst case scenario?
I think if you are a caring employer, anybody that gets injured in any shape or form, that's devastating for the business, isn't it? And if it's a fatality, it's unimaginable, really, isn't it? The impact that will have on morale, the reputation of the business, and so on and so forth. I think for me, the type of businesses I love working with is where they say, Adrian, we do really care about our staff. We want to do everything possible to keep them safe. Can you help us? Love that. If you're thinking, do I really have to do this stuff? I'll probably say you should, but you'll never get found out. Just don't let any of your staff ever have a bad crash, will you? Okay. That is not within your control. Because when a serious incident occurs on the road network and the police are involved, they have a statutory responsibility to determine the purpose of the journey. And if they determine the purpose of the journey is work related, their investigations will come your way. And that's when they'll start to ask those challenging questions. And when the answer to those questions is no, we don't have, no, we don't do, no, I can't show you, then potentially you have failed in your legal duty of care under the Health and Safety at Work Act, and you can find yourself in court. And if found guilty, there is a fine structure that kicks in now, and the fine structure would typically see a starting point fine of 20% of turnover.
Okay.
That, I would imagine, would be very painful for most businesses, if not take them down. How many businesses do we know that have got 20% of their turnover in a savings account as a just in case? Now,
It's a huge, I mean, given that the average turnover in the UK for most businesses is around £800,000, that 20% of 800,000 is a huge dent in financially what makes that business viable. So yeah, it really makes you think as well from not only a moral perspective, but also from a
yeah,
financial one too.
yeah. And the worst case scenario is where there's a fatality involved. If the Crown Prosecution Service decide that they're going to go down the corporate manslaughter route as opposed to the fine structure because of failing in health and safety, if found guilty, then there is a custodial sentence given out for the controlling minds. And I use the word minds because it might be determined that the business is run and controlled by more than one person. Okay. In which case, they're all equally responsible. And the custodial sentence is dished out to all of them. And there are some examples of that on the internet. And privately, I can share those with clients who are thinking, does this really happen? Yes, it does. And there is also something that employers need to be very mindful of is that when you have somebody else within the business that has a responsibility to manage this stuff for you, you need to be confident that they are competent and they do it. Because there is a separate charge called gross negligence manslaughter. And there's a really interesting case that's on the internet still, even though it happened several years ago, where the business owner got a 7.5 year custodial sentence because the court said, you're in charge. It's your responsibility. A key employee within his business who was responsible for doing something that didn't get done, that resulted in a fatality on the road network, that individual got 5 years, 3 months under the gross negligence manslaughter legislation.
Right.
So two different bits of legislation kicked in, two people went to prison. Scary stuff. Thankfully, that doesn't happen too often, but there are umpteen fines being given out that we don't hear about because they're not that newsworthy. But by golly, are they going to impact on that business? And potentially the people that drive, very often an employee will say, why do I have to do all this stuff? Because not only are you protecting yourself, but you're protecting your business. And if you protect your business, you'll keep your job.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it always surprises me. There is a lot of regulation around this area, and quite rightly, because it's about saving people's lives. And we spend a hell of a lot of time at work, don't we, Adrian? So I think it's really
Yeah,
important to create the right environments for people that they feel safe. And ultimately, a safe environment is a more productive one. From a financial perspective, that can actually drive profits and drive revenue where employees feel that they're being looked after.
yeah.
It can help massively in terms of engagement too. Finally, then, first and foremost, really appreciate the opportunity to have a great conversation, one of many that we've had over the years, Adrian. And I know you're
Mm.
incredibly passionate about what you do. If people do need to get in touch with Adrian on the back of today's podcast, I'll put and include a link below in the podcast so you can connect with Adrian directly. But I would encourage you all, if anybody has listened to today and believe that some of the information we've shared is of value, then you'll certainly believe that the business health check would be a great place to start. And for that reason, I would definitely encourage you all to fill that in. It takes literally less than 60 seconds to complete. And it's a great way for you to start your journey in the right way to, again, build that compliance. But more importantly, your own peace of mind as a business leader that you know this has been covered. So, really appreciate today, Adrian. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, and thank you very much to everybody that's listening to us.
Excellent.